Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Nonprofit Fundamentals. I'm Adam Holzberg, joined alongside with April Kushner, and today we are here to talk about key performance indicators, also known as KPIs. So what are KPIs? These are different indicators that can be helpful for management, for the board, for other stakeholders to really get a good idea of what's going on within the organization. So this could really provide information about program impact. It can really help you with decision making, enhance operational efficiencies, monitor financial health. These are all just very important indicators that can really be beneficial to your organization. So we're going to go over some of the more important ones, but what's really important to know what your organization does, what's important to you, and then develop KPIs that fit that what's most beneficial to your organization. So we're going to be talking about financial KPIs, but there are others outside the finance world, operational KPIs. So for a nonprofit, a lot of this relates to your donors. So your donor retention rate, your average gift size, your acquisition cost for donors, the repeat donor rate. We could just keep going on and on with that. But there are a lot of different, essentially a scorecard that you can review and get a sense of what is going on with your operations, and you can do that by looking at KPIs. So before we jump into financial KPIs, because April's very eager to jump in there, I just want to say it can be too much of a good thing. So you don't want, countless KPIs and reviewing all these different scorecards. You want to find what's important to you and just stick to that. So I would definitely say keep it under 10. Don't go to double digits. 1 or 2 is probably not enough, but not more than 10. It's probably the sweet spot for a number of KPIs. So with that, let's go into the financial world. So April, what's a financial KPI that's very important to you?
I wouldn't say this one's very important to me per se, but I think this one's always a big hot topic for nonprofits, and that's the program efficiency ratio or your functional expense allocation ratios. So as a nonprofit, it's very specific to that industry. This is not something that for-profits need to do, but nonprofits need to allocate their costs between program and supporting services. So your program, your G&A, your fundraising, that's always an important percentage. Donors used to focus on this a lot, and I think they've gotten away from it a little bit, where donors always wanted to give to programs, and now they, are giving more for general purposes. So, while the percentages can be completely different for nonprofits, depending whether they're government funded or fully funded through contributions, the benchmark tends to be around 70% and above. So again, very different from nonprofit to nonprofit. There are some organizations that are below a 70% because they spend a lot of money with direct mail services in order to fundraise and raise all of their contributions, where other organizations who are heavily grant funded may have higher percentages. So again, you want to calculate it for your organization and what your business model is, and follow that trend over a several year period to see what the impact is.
And we actually had a whole episode about functional expenses, the overhead myth. So
yeah, feel free to go watch that one as well.
So let's go over the fundraising efficiency ratio. So while this does deal with fundraising, that's kind of more on the operational side, there's that finance aspect to it. So essentially this ratio is asking for every dollar you spend on fundraising, or I should probably change that, for every dollar you raise in contributions and grants, how much did that cost you? So that's what this ratio is really looking at. There is a benchmark for this. Typically they say you want to be spending about 20 cents for every dollar raised. I've seen that benchmark go as low as 10 cents and as high as 30 cents. We're just going to put it right in the middle and say 20 cents is a good spot to be in. This is just a good way to benchmark yourself against other organizations. If you are well above that 30 cents per dollar raise. Maybe there are things you could do more efficiently. It's just kind of a way for you to look internally and see do the best practices when it comes to fundraising. So another one is your personnel expense ratio. What this one's really doing, and there's no real benchmark for this is really organization specific. You're looking at how much labor cost does it take to support your organization's revenues. If this is going up, that's a sign, that could be a potential sign that your personnel costs are either there's some inefficiencies or maybe your revenue is being cut and now you need to make some decisions on personnel. This is kind of more like a warning signal if anything's going on with your labor costs. And it's really just looking more at trends and seeing which direction it's going for your organization.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Adam, why don't you tell us a little bit about revenue diversification?
All right, so this is a very hot topic, revenue diversification. Essentially, as a nonprofit, there is this push to make sure you are not overly dependent on one stream of revenue. And there's some ratios out there that you could review. Government funding is a very big area of revenue for nonprofits. So there's a government reliance ratio. Essentially, you're looking at, of all the money you raise, how much does that come from the government? Government's a single payer. You could break that up between the federal and state. That kind of gives you a sense of, all right, of our total revenue, we're getting X% from the government. Is that too high? Is it going up? If it's going up, you're becoming more and more dependent. You can also look at just private funding, private grants, similar idea, and then also your earned revenue. So this is revenue that's not contributions or grants. This could be various fees for programs that you're charging, tuition, for instance, for schools. This is considered good revenue because you're not dependent on grants and contributions. So the higher that percentage, that means you're a stronger base for the organization from a diversification standpoint.
I thought I heard one time that diversification was not a good thing.
Don't spread rumors about that. So there is some counterclaims, we'll call it, regarding is revenue diversification a good thing? The argument is essentially that some of the largest nonprofits out there, of the top 50 we'll say, I think 90% of them really only have one or two main streams of revenue. They don't really have a diverse revenue streams. Mm-hmm. So the idea there is that you find out what you're good at and you put your resources to that one stream of revenue and really drive it, and that will support the organization's growth. The counterclaim to that is if there's an issue with that stream of revenue, it dries up, now you're in trouble. So diversification really protects you from any shortcomings in that one stream of revenue. Mm-hmm. So,
okay.
Good question.
All right. So a few financial benchmarks as well, some financial KPIs that I think are important is a current ratio. So that's your current assets to current liabilities. When you look at your balance sheet or the statement of financial position, ideally you want your assets to be higher than your liabilities, at least a 1.0 or above. You don't want to see an organization that's carrying a lot of liabilities or a lot of current debt and current accrued expenses and things like that, where you don't necessarily have the cash and receivables to be able to fund it. So those are some important numbers to take a look at. There's also an AR turnover. So if you're a numbers person, you'd want to look at either an AR turnover or a days in AR. A lot of times AR is related to pre-approved services for nonprofits, but at the same time some government agencies can be slow to pay. So you'd want to look at that trend year over year to see how long your AR is outstanding before it gets collected.
Are you a numbers person?
I am a numbers person. Working capital ratio is another real important one. You want to make sure that you have cash reserves on hand, at least, in that 3 to 6 month range. Ideally, some people say that you want to have 6 months worth of reserves. I think because of the steady cash flow and the way the revenue comes in on a lot of nonprofits, 6 months of reserves is not always attainable, but something that you should strive for, that 6 month reserves in your cash and investments.
And then just one final one is the leverage ratio. This is just looking at the total debt of the organization compared to your total assets. They say a benchmark for this is typically, you want to be less than 30%. It's very similar to the current ratio, just making sure that your debt levels don't exceed, dangerous levels compared to assets. Just kind of looking at financial health of the organization is really what those current ratios are doing. So those are, a number of ratios, financial ratios for nonprofits. Not saying that each one needs to be used for your organization. You need to find what makes the most sense for your situation, your mission, and kind of assess yourself as you go forward. Any closing thoughts?
No, just look at it on a trend. Go back a couple years, see how it's trending, and then hopefully it helps you make some management decisions.
All right, that's everything. Thank you, everyone.